When my wife came back from her week to reset, she walked into our house like a woman stepping out of somebody else's vacation. I was sitting at the kitchen table with a cold cup of coffee, watching the clock over the stove. It was a little past 7. Streetlights had just come on outside, and the house had that strange quiet to it you only hear when you've been alone too many days in a row. The door opened, and there she was. Danielle rolled her suitcase in with one hand and held her phone in the other, laughing at something on the screen. Not a small chuckle either. A full, open laugh I hadn't heard from her in a long time. Her hair was done different, loose curls instead of the tight bun she wore to work. Skin a little darker than usual, like she'd been in the sun more than she said she would. "Hey, Mal," she said, still smiling as she set the suitcase by the stairs. "You're up?" "Yeah," I answered. "Couldn't sleep." She crossed the room and gave me a hug. It was warm, but it landed shallow. Her arms went around my shoulders, but her weight never really settled on me. It felt like a hug you give a church member you ain't seen in a while. Polite. Familiar. Not the kind that comes with missing somebody. "House looks good," she said, pulling back. "You didn't burn it down." "I tried," I said. "Smoke alarm wouldn't let me." She laughed again, moved over to the cabinets, and started pulling out plates like she'd just come home from a regular day at work. I watched her while she talked, eyes running over the little changes. New tan line on her shoulder where the strap of her top stopped. Fresh nail color. A simple gold anklet I hadn't seen before. "You hungry?" I asked. "Starving," she said. "You would have loved the food up there. I went to this rooftop place one night. They had live music, city lights, the whole thing. We ordered." She stopped for half a second. "I ordered this grilled salmon, with, all that fancy sauce stuff." She kept talking, but that word sat in the air between us. We. She had said we before she changed it. It was quick, but I heard it. Old men who work nights learn to listen between words. I didn't say anything. I just took a slow sip of my cold coffee and nodded like I was only half listening. "Sound nice," I said. "You get the rest you needed?" She smiled, almost too bright. "Yeah. I really did. I feel lighter. Like I can breathe again." I gave a small smile back, but inside, something quiet shifted. Not a storm. Not anger. Just a small, solid weight dropping into place. While she talked about hiking trails and spa days, I watched her face, listened to every little detail, and stored that in the back of my mind. At that moment, I didn't know exactly what had happened on her week away. But I knew one thing for sure. Whatever she'd found out there, she didn't bring all of it back home. Before everything shifted, before that we slipped out of her mouth like a loose thread, our life had a rhythm to it. Not perfect. Not exciting. But steady, the kind of steady you don't notice until it's gone. I'm a morning man by necessity, not nature. Working for the city transit depot will do that to you. My alarm went off at 4:45 every weekday, same buzzing tone I'd been meaning to change for years. I'd sit on the edge of the bed for a minute, rubbing sleep out of my eyes, feeling the stiffness in my knees remind me that I wasn't 30 anymore. Danielle usually slept through it, turned to the wall, wrapped in that big gray blanket she loved. By the time I laced up my steel-toe boots, she was just a quiet shape under the covers. Most mornings, before leaving, I'd stand in the doorway for a second. Just watching. Not in a sad way, more like a habit built over 22 years. Checking on the person you share your life with. Making sure her chest rose and fell steady. Making sure the world still felt familiar. I'd close the door gently and head out into the dark. My days were simple. Long hours at the depot. Checking repair logs. Making sure the younger techs didn't override safety protocols because they were trying to rush through lunch breaks. Sometimes I'd catch them doing something sloppy and I'd pull them to the side. "You rushing now makes somebody pay later," I'd say. They'd nod, half listening, but I knew my words stuck. Wisdom usually does, even if it sits for a while before it sprouts. Lunch was usually a sandwich I made the night before. Turkey, mustard, wheat bread if I remembered. Danielle used to pack my lunches back when the kids were young, slipping little notes inside. But when our daughter, Leah, moved out, those notes stopped. Danielle said she got busy. I never asked again. When I clocked out late afternoons, the house was usually already alive. Danielle's car in the driveway. Music playing from the kitchen, something upbeat, always her playlists, never mine. She'd be chopping something on the counter, wearing that blue apron she liked, laughing at a podcast or talking to her sister. I'd walk in, say, "Smell good in here," and kiss the side of her head. She'd smile, distracted but warm, and hand me a spoon to taste whatever she was working on. We'd eat around 6. Sometimes 7. Side by side on the couch afterward, her on her phone, me watching sports or reading. Quiet evenings. Comfortable ones. A whole decade of routine. But somewhere in the last year, something shifted, not all at once, but like a slow leak you don't notice until the tire goes soft. Danielle stopped eating with me at the table as often. She'd say she wasn't hungry yet, or she'd already grabbed something after work with the girls. She kept her phone face down. Started going upstairs earlier. Started saying I didn't get her stressed the way she needed. We argued more, small arguments that never went anywhere. "Mal, you never want to try new things," she'd say. "Danielle, we just went to Charleston last month," I'd answer. "That wasn't new," she'd say. "That was safe." Safe. She said that word a lot toward the end. She started calling me predictable. Then boring. Mostly joking, but not always. And then came the night she told me she needed space to breathe. We were sitting in the living room. I had just turned off the TV. She turned to me with a seriousness that didn't match the moment. "Mal, I just need a reset. A break. Just a week. I need to figure out why I feel so stuck." I remember blinking at her. "Stuck where?" "In my life," she said. "In this routine. In everything. Not in this marriage," she didn't say. But the space around the words was loud enough. I didn't fight her on it. I didn't beg or tell her no. I just said the same thing I've said most of my life when something hurts. "All right. If that's what you need." She packed 2 suitcases the next day. Told me she booked a small cabin outside Boone. Wanted fresh air. Time to think. Maybe hike. Maybe journal. She said she'd be staying someplace quiet. Someplace without distractions. But when she came back a week later, Danielle was bright. Rested. Glowing in a way that didn't match the crying into a journal in the woods image I had pictured. I thought about that as she unpacked the night she returned, humming to herself, stepping lightly around the room. I noticed she had new perfume, something softer, sweeter. She'd never bought perfume without me before. That night, her phone kept lighting up beside her on the bed. She smiled at the screen, thumb tapping fast. I asked who she was talking to. "Oh, just Marcy from work," she said without looking up. But I'd never seen her smile like that at Marcy's name. She didn't ask how my week went. Didn't ask if I missed her. Didn't lean into me the way she used to wrap herself around my arm after trips. Everything about her was familiar, and nothing about her was the same. Still, I played my part. Cooked breakfast the next morning. Asked how she slept. Got dressed for work while she talked quickly about how she felt renewed, lighter, motivated. Words she hadn't used in months. Words that didn't feel like they came from solitude. She told me about a hike she took, describing the trail like a brochure, but her details were off, the type of view wrong for the area she claimed to be in. I didn't correct her. I just listened. She left for work wearing a new blouse, new earrings, and the same bright glow that walked in the door the night before. And as I watched her drive away, I felt an unfamiliar weight settle in my chest. A quiet one. A patient one. The kind that doesn't scream. The kind that waits and watches. For the first time in our marriage, I didn't feel like I fully knew the woman I was looking at. And something in me whispered that the truth wasn't far behind. The first real hint didn't come from anything dramatic. No secret phone calls. No lipstick on a shirt. No whispered names in the dark. It came from the smallest things, the kind of things you only notice when you've lived with someone long enough to recognize every version of them. 3 days after Danielle got back from her reset, I started noticing her glow had roots she wasn't talking about. That Friday morning, she came down the stairs in a bright yellow blouse I'd never seen before. It hugged her just a little different. She walked like she felt good in it, confident in a way I hadn't seen from her in months. Her smile was relaxed, almost lazy. "Morning," she said, grabbing an apple from the bowl on the counter. "Morning," I said back. "New shirt?" She nodded without thinking. "Yeah. We bought it." And there it was again. That tiny stutter in her voice. That moment where her eyes widened just enough before she corrected herself. "I mean, I bought it up there. On the trip." She recovered fast. Danielle always did. She was good with words, better with tone, and quick with explanations. But that half second before she fixed her mistake, that's where the truth lives. People can lie with a sentence. But the truth sits in the pause. I didn't press her. I didn't ask who we was supposed to be. I just nodded, poured my coffee, and watched her talk about her plans for the day. She spoke fast. Too fast. And when she hugged me goodbye, she kissed my cheek instead of my lips. That was new. That was quiet distance disguised as casual affection. I went about my day stored that moment away. The next clue showed up that Saturday night. Danielle wanted a home spa night, something she hadn't mentioned in years. She filled the bathroom with candles, set up some kind of fancy bath salt setup, and put on soft jazz music. I was sitting on the bed folding laundry when she called out, "Mal, can you grab my bag from the closet?" I got up, walked to her side of the closet, and reached for her black travel bag. When I picked it up, something slid out of the front pocket and dropped to the floor. A receipt. Not old, the ink was crisp. It was for lingerie. Not cheap lingerie either. Something you don't buy unless you plan on somebody seeing it. The date? 3 days into her solo reset. I stood there a second, looking at that paper, not sure what feeling I was waiting to hit me. Anger? Hurt? Confusion? But all I felt was that same quiet weight pressing deeper into my ribs. Danielle opened the bathroom door a crack and said, "You find it?" I slid the receipt back into the pocket, zipped it shut, and handed her the bag. "Yeah," I said. "It was right there." She smiled, kissed my cheek again, and closed the door. I sat on the bed, hand still warm from touching the bag. Danielle turned the music louder. I folded another shirt. And I understood something in that moment. The little things weren't adding up, because they weren't supposed to. Sunday afternoon brought another sign. Danielle and I were supposed to go to church. She claimed she wasn't feeling well and wanted to stay home. I left by myself. When I got back, she was sitting on the couch, hairstyled, makeup done, scrolling on her phone with a soft smile. "How you feeling?" I asked. "Better," she said. "Just needed to rest." But the thing about resting is, it doesn't usually leave you fully dressed and glowing like you're about to go out. She had a new anklet, thin gold, delicate, wrapped around her leg like a secret someone else had unwrapped before I ever saw it. Danielle had never worn anklets. Said they looked too young. I didn't mention it. I just sat down next to her. She locked her phone instantly. Too fast. My daughter used to do that when she was hiding a failing grade. "Did Pastor Brooks ask about me?" Danielle said casually. "A little," I answered. "What did she say?" "That she missed seeing you." Danielle nodded like she was relieved but uneasy. Then she changed the subject to what she wanted for dinner. But her phone kept lighting up beside her. Same notification pattern. Same glow on her face every time she glanced at it. She still kept it face down. That night, she told me a story about her trip. On the third night, she said while painting her nails, I went to this restaurant with the most beautiful view. I stayed there for hours, watching the city lights. It felt like freedom. I let her talk, listening to the details. It was this rooftop place, she said. You'd love the atmosphere. They had this perfect old-school playlist playing all night. I leaned forward, tying my boots for the next morning, and asked a simple question. What was the name of the restaurant? Oh, she said, waving her hand, something like Skyline Bistro or Skylight Terrace, I don't remember exactly. But I did. That trailhead she described? Wrong Terrain. That restaurant name? Didn't exist in Boone or anywhere near it. Those city lights she talked about? No city big enough for that kind of view in that direction. Then she slipped again. We got there just before sunset, and she froze. Started over, slower. I got there just before sunset. I didn't call her out. She didn't look at me either. The final clue wasn't a word. It was an absence. Danielle had moved her wedding ring. Subtle. Quiet. Easy to miss if you weren't looking. She shifted it to her right hand during the week and then moved it back without explanation. But the faint indent on her right ring finger told the truth. She'd worn it that way long enough for the skin to adapt. People don't do that for no reason. People do that when they're stepping into a space where they don't want to look married. Or when they want to pretend they're not. I noticed it on Tuesday morning when she reached for her coffee mug. That pale indentation on her right hand caught the kitchen light. And that was the moment I realized something. She wasn't just acting different. She wasn't just glowing. She wasn't just slipping words. She had spent that week with somebody else. Even then, I didn't explode. I didn't accuse. I didn't raise my voice. I just carried the weight quietly, like a man holding a box with something fragile inside, something that had already cracked, whether he wanted to admit it or not. All week long, Danielle floated through the house like she was in a better mood, a better season, a better life. She laughed more. Texted more. Smiled to herself like she was replaying the best version of her week. But none of it had anything to do with me. She was present in the house. But her heart was someplace else. And her glow, that didn't belong to me anymore. Still, I stayed calm. A man learns a lot by watching in silence. But silence has a point where waiting becomes knowing. And on the fourth night after she returned, when the house went still and her breathing settled into sleep beside me, I got up, put on my jacket, grabbed my keys, and stepped quietly into the dark. There was one place I hadn't looked in years. And I suddenly knew it was time. I didn't drive far that night. Just a few blocks down from our house to the small park where the streetlights always buzzed a little too loud. I parked under the big oak tree, turned off the engine, and let the quiet settle in. I sat there with both hands on the wheel, breathing slow, steady, the way you do when you already know the answer but you're not ready to see it written down. For 22 years, Danielle and I had built a life that felt predictable in all the right ways. Nothing wild. Nothing reckless. Nothing that made you look over your shoulder. We didn't live in secrets. At least, that's what I believed. I reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out my phone. There was an old app on it, one I hadn't touched since our daughter was in college. Back then, I used it to keep track of her car when she was driving home from campus late at night. It was a safety thing. A dad thing. Part of the just-in-case mindset that comes from working around the city long enough to know what can happen in the wrong places. When Leah graduated, the need for the app faded. The notification stopped. The icon drifted somewhere between calculator and weather widgets. Years passed, and I almost forgot it existed. Almost. I opened it. The sign-in screen popped up, same old logo, same color scheme. I typed in the login information, surprised I remembered it. The system hesitated, loading, then unlocked. There it was. Danielle's car. A blue dot on the map. Current location, our driveway. Normal. I clicked the tab for history. My finger hovered there for a second. I wasn't afraid of seeing something ugly. I wasn't afraid of being right. What scared me was understanding what that truth would mean for the rest of my life, and for the rest of hers. But some things don't wait for courage. So I tapped the button. The screen loaded the past 7 days, the exact length of Danielle's reset trip. At first, all I saw were timestamps. Rows and rows of them. Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. I clicked the first day. A small route map expanded across the screen. And right there, bold as daylight, was the first thing she hadn't told me. Her car hadn't gone to Boone. It had gone 2 hours in the opposite direction, to Lake Eden. Not a cabin town. Not a hiking retreat. Not a place to get away from everything. Lake Eden was a boutique vacation spot filled with lakeside hotels, wine tastings, rooftop restaurants, and couples attractions. I stared at the map, my thumb frozen on the screen. Not shocked. Not angry. Just quietly sure I'd been walking around half asleep in my own marriage. I zoomed in. The map showed a pin. Eden Ridge Boutique Hotel, parking lot. Stayed, 4 nights, 23 hours total. 4 nights. Not 1. Not 2. 4. Every night of her trip. I felt that calm in me settle deeper, like a man bracing for a wave that already broke over him. I clicked the next day. Same pin. Same location. Then the next. And the next. All the same. The last night showed a second pin. Rooftop lounge, the Crown Terrace. I clicked it. A photo popped up on the screen, a real picture from the restaurant's website. White tablecloths. String lights overhead. City skyline in the distance. Exactly the type of place Danielle said she had gone alone. Except she didn't say Crown Terrace. She had said skylight something, because she didn't want me to find it. The reality was hitting like raindrops, quiet but steady, each one adding to the weight. I pressed the detail tab for the final night. And that's when I saw something that made my stomach drop, just a little. Shared location detected. Second registered device nearby for 3 nights. My breath caught in my throat. The app didn't tell me the name of the device, privacy laws changed years ago. But it told me enough to know she wasn't alone. There was a feature in the app one hadn't used since the kids were teenagers, cross-referencing workplace directories. It was meant to help parents identify known contacts near their kids' locations. I tapped it without thinking. When it loaded, there were 3 possible matches from her company. One was a woman in payroll. One was a driver in logistics. And the third was a name I already didn't like for reasons I couldn't explain before that moment. Andre Lewis, Regional Operations Manager. I stared at that name. Andre. The funny coworker. The work friend. The man she said reminded her of her brother. The man she mentioned often enough for me to know his name, but never with enough detail for me to form a picture. And suddenly that picture was clear enough. He was the only regional manager with routine travel to Lake Eden. The only one whose meetings were scheduled the exact days Danielle was there. I clicked his company profile. It showed a picture. Black man. Early 40s. Smile too smooth. Suit too perfect. A man who looked like he knew exactly what he was doing. I closed the app and leaned back in the seat, letting the air leave my lungs slow. I felt the betrayal, but not the way I expected. Not like a punch. More like a cold wind blowing through a door I didn't realize had been left open. 22 years of trust had become one long crack I didn't know to look for. I thought about her laughter when she walked in the house. Her glow. Her new perfume. The ring indentation on the wrong finger. The we she kept tripping over. The lingerie receipt. Everything lined up now. I put my phone face down on my thigh and rested both hands on the steering wheel again. The night felt too still around me, like the world was listening. Inside, I felt two things: a heavy sorrow and a strange, unexpected clarity. There's a moment in every man's life where he chooses who he is going to be when the truth knocks the breath out of him. Some men break. Some lash out. Some drown themselves in anger. Me? I just sat there quietly, letting the truth settle, piece by piece, until it stopped feeling like a collapse and started feeling like confirmation. People show you who they are eventually. It just takes time. I drove home slowly, the road empty, the streetlights stretching long shadows across the pavement. When I walked into the house, everything looked the same as it always did. Danielle was asleep in our bed, curled away from my side. Her hair was spread across the pillow like she'd been dreaming deep. I stood there a moment, watching her breathe. I didn't feel hate, or rage, or the urge to shake her awake and confront her. All I felt was the quiet truth that the woman I'd loved for most of my adult life had walked out of this house to find something she didn't think she could get from me. And she came back smiling because she thought I'd never know. I went to the guest bathroom, washed my face, and stared at myself in the mirror. That older man looking back at me, I could see the pain in my eyes, but I could also see the steadiness. This wasn't going to break me. It was going to reveal me. I walked back to the bedroom, stood at the edge of the bed, and whispered, not to her, but to myself. All right. Now I know. Then I reached down, grabbed my pillow, and walked to the guest room, closing the door softly behind me. For the first time in 22 years, I slept in a separate bed. Not because I was angry, but because I knew the next steps in my life needed a clear head, a steady voice, and a kind of strength that doesn't come from being tangled in the same sheets as the person who lied to you. And I knew in the morning, everything would change. I woke up in the guest room before sunrise, lying on a mattress that felt unfamiliar and honest at the same time. The kind of bed where you sleep alone not because you want to, but because pretending everything is fine has stopped being an option. The house was quiet. Danielle was still asleep in our room. I moved slowly, quietly, the way a man does when he's carrying a truth too heavy to spill. I made coffee, sat at the kitchen table, and let the steam rise into the cold morning air while I thought through everything I'd seen on that screen the night before. I didn't replay the betrayal. That part was already set in stone. What I focused on was what came next. I've never been the type to raise my voice. Never been the type to break things or slam doors. My father used to say, a man's power is in his paws. Meaning, if you can stay calm when you have every reason not to, you'll see the path other men miss. So I paused. I made a plan. Not revenge. Not punishment. Just truth, brought into the light in a way that couldn't be twisted or run from. The first thing I did was open my phone and take screenshots of everything from the GPS logs. Every route. Every timestamp. The hotel name. The conference center. Andre's meeting schedule. I organized them by date, labeled them, and stored them in a hidden folder. Then I checked Danielle's social media. She hadn't posted anything during her trip, but she liked pictures from the exact area where her car had been. One was a scenic overlook that couples took pictures at. I saved it. Another was a restaurant photo from the Crown Terrace, a post she liked from a coworker who had been there months earlier. That one didn't matter much, but it confirmed something important. Danielle had been planning this trip longer than she admitted. The next thing I did was something I had never imagined myself doing. I reached out to Andre's wife. Her name was Tanya Lewis. I found her number listed under a PTA directory from years back. Both she and Danielle had volunteered once for a school fundraiser. I still had the contact list saved. I stared at her number for almost 2 minutes. Not because I was unsure, but because this step had weight. Once I made that call, the truth wasn't mine alone anymore. At 8:12 a.m., I dialed. She picked up on the second ring, voice tired, like she hadn't slept well. Hello? Good morning. Tanya? This is Malcolm Carter. There was a pause. A long, slow one. "Oh," she said quietly. "Hi. I know who you are. I didn't rush. I'm sorry to bother you on a Saturday. I found something. And before I take it anywhere else, I wanted to come to you first. Out of respect." Her breath caught. A woman knows when bad news is coming. "Is this about Andre?" she asked. I closed my eyes for a second. "Yes." "And Danielle?" She didn't say another word. Didn't cry. Didn't shout. Her voice came out steady, but already broken. "Where can we meet?" We agreed on a small coffee shop on the south side, neutral ground. I drove there in silence, parked, and waited. When Tanya walked in, she carried something in her eyes I recognized, the look of a woman who already knew the truth, but prayed she was wrong. I stood, nodded politely, and let her take the seat across from me. She didn't ask how I was doing. Didn't offer small talk. "Show me," she said. So I did. I slid my phone across the table and let her scroll through the screenshots. One by one. Route by route. Hotel to restaurant to conference center. I didn't add commentary. Didn't fill the silence. Her hands trembled after the third image. After the fifth, she wiped a tear with the edge of her thumb. After the seventh, she pushed the phone back slowly. "I knew it," she whispered. "I knew he wasn't on those regional audits alone. I didn't know it was your wife." We sat in silence for a few seconds. Two strangers connected by the same wound. "I'm not looking for drama," I said. "I'm not showing up at your house. I'm not confronting him at work. I just need to understand the full truth before." I exhaled. "Before I decide what comes next." I clicked his company profile. It showed a picture. Black man. Early 40s. Smile too smooth. Suit too perfect. A man who looked like he knew exactly what he was doing. I closed the app and leaned back in the seat, letting the air leave my lungs slow. I felt the betrayal, but not the way I expected. Not like a punch. More like a cold wind blowing through a door I didn't realize had been left open. 22 years of trust had become one long crack I didn't know to look for. I thought about her laughter when she walked in the house. Her glow. Her new perfume. The ring indentation on the wrong finger. The way she kept tripping over. The lingerie receipt. Everything lined up now. I put my phone face down on my thigh and rested both hands on the steering wheel again. The night felt too still around me. Like the world was listening. Inside, I felt two things. A heavy sorrow. And a strange, unexpected clarity. There's a moment in every man's life where he chooses who he is going to be when the truth knocks the breath out of him. Some men break. Some lash out. Some drown themselves in anger. Me? I just sat there quietly, letting the truth settle, piece by piece, until it stopped feeling like a collapse and started feeling like confirmation. People show you who they are eventually. It just takes time. I drove home slowly, the road empty, the streetlights stretching long shadows across the pavement. When I walked into the house, everything looked the same as it always did. Danielle was asleep in our bed, curled away from my side. Her hair was spread across the pillow like she'd been dreaming deep. I stood there a moment, watching her breathe. I didn't feel hate. Or rage. Or the urge to shake her awake and confront her. All I felt was the quiet truth that the woman I'd loved for most of my adult life had walked out of this house to find something she didn't think she could get from me. And she came back smiling because she thought I'd never know. I went to the guest bathroom, washed my face, and stared at myself in the mirror. That older man looking back at me, I could see the pain in my eyes, but I could also see the steadiness. This wasn't going to break me. It was going to reveal me. I walked back to the bedroom, stood at the edge of the bed, and whispered, not to her, but to myself. All right. Now I know. Then I reached down, grabbed my pillow, and walked to the guest room, closing the door softly behind me. For the first time in 22 years, I slept in a separate bed. Not because I was angry, but because I knew the next steps in my life needed a clear head, a steady voice, and a kind of strength that doesn't come from being tangled in the same sheets as the person who lied to you. And I knew in the morning, everything would change. I woke up in the guest room before sunrise, lying on a mattress that felt unfamiliar and honest at the same time. The kind of bed where you sleep alone not because you want to, but because pretending everything is fine has stopped being an option. The house was quiet. Danielle was still asleep in our room. I moved slowly, quietly, the way a man does when he's carrying a truth too heavy to spill. I made coffee, sat at the kitchen table, and let the steam rise into the cold morning air while I thought through everything I'd seen on that screen the night before. I didn't replay the betrayal. That part was already set in stone. What I focused on was what came next. I've never been the type to raise my voice. Never been the type to break things or slam doors. My father used to say, a man's power is in his paws. Meaning, if you can stay calm when you have every reason not to, you'll see the path other men miss. So I paused. I made a plan. Not revenge. Not punishment. Just truth, brought into the light in a way that couldn't be twisted or run from. The first thing I did was open my phone and take screenshots of everything from the GPS logs. Every route. Every timestamp. The hotel name. The conference center. Andre's meeting schedule. I organized them by date, labeled them, and stored them in a hidden folder. Then I checked Danielle's social media. She hadn't posted anything during her trip, but she liked pictures from the exact area where her car had been. One was a scenic overlook that couples took pictures at. I saved it. Another was a restaurant photo from the Crown Terrace, a post she liked from a coworker who had been there months earlier. That one didn't matter much, but it confirmed something important. Danielle had been planning this trip longer than she admitted. The next thing I did was something I had never imagined myself doing. I reached out to Andre's wife. Her name was Tanya Lewis. I found her number listed under a PTA directory from years back. Both she and Danielle had volunteered once for a school fundraiser. I still had the contact list saved. I stared at her number for almost 2 minutes. Not because I was unsure, but because this step had weight. Once I made that call, the truth wasn't mine alone anymore. At 8:12 a.m., I dialed. She picked up on the second ring, voice tired, like she hadn't slept well. Hello? Good morning. Tanya? This is Malcolm Carter. There was a pause. A long, slow one. Oh, she said quietly. Hi. I know who you are. I didn't rush. I'm sorry to bother you on a Saturday. I found something. And before I take it anywhere else, I wanted to come to you first. Out of respect. Her breath caught. A woman knows when bad news is coming. Is this about Andre? She asked. I closed my eyes for a second. Yes. And Danielle. She didn't say another word. Didn't cry. Didn't shout. Her voice came out steady, but already broken. Where can we meet? We agreed on a small coffee shop on the south side, neutral ground. I drove there in silence, parked, and waited. When Tanya walked in, she carried something in her eyes I recognized, the look of a woman who already knew the truth, but prayed she was wrong. I stood, nodded politely, and let her take the seat across from me. She didn't ask how I was doing. Didn't offer small talk. Show me, she said. So I did. I slid my phone across the table and let her scroll through the screenshots. One by one. Route by route. Hotel to restaurant to conference center. I didn't add commentary. Didn't fill the silence. Her hands trembled after the third image. After the fifth, she wiped a tear with the edge of her thumb. After the seventh, she pushed the phone back slowly. I knew it, she whispered. I knew he wasn't on those regional audits alone. I didn't know it was your wife. We sat in silence for a few seconds. Two strangers connected by the same wound. I'm not looking for drama, I said. I'm not showing up at your house. I'm not confronting him at work. I just need to understand the full truth before. I exhaled. Before I decide what comes next. Tanya nodded. I appreciate that. Really? Then she reached into her purse and pulled out something that made the room tilt just slightly. A stack of printed emails. I've been collecting these for months, she said. I didn't know who the other woman was. But your screenshots, they match the dates. They match everything. She handed them to me. I didn't want to read another man's private messages, but I forced myself to read the parts that mattered. Andre had written about finally feeling alive again. About escaping to the lake. About someone who understands him better than his own wife. None of the emails used names. But there was no mistaking who he was talking about. Tanya swallowed hard. I want my truth out, she said. And you deserve yours. So, if you ever decide to confront them, I'll stand with you. However you want to do it. Her strength humbled me. Her pain mirrored mine. We weren't allies by choice, but by circumstance. We exchanged numbers before parting ways. When I got back to my truck, I sat there a long while, letting the weight of everything settle. I could have gone home and confronted Danielle right then. I could have exploded. I could have demanded answers, shouted, broken things, made a scene. But that wasn't the man I was raised to be. My father taught me something a long time ago. Son, when a person digs their own hole, don't pull them out. Just let them finish what they started. And Danielle had been digging for a while. So instead of confronting her, I made one more call, to someone who knew both of us, someone who could guide this moment with fairness and clarity. Pastor Evelyn Brooks. She picked up sounding warm and calm as always. Malcolm? Everything all right? No, I said honestly. But I need your help. She didn't ask me to explain on the phone. Pastor Brooks never rushed a hurting man. Come by my office Monday morning. We'll talk. And invite Danielle too. Tell her it's a marriage check-in. She'll come. I agreed. The trap wasn't mine. The lies weren't mine. But the truth? That was going to be spoken in the right place, in the right way, with witnesses who understood the weight of vows. Monday would change everything. When I got home, Danielle was in the kitchen cooking dinner, smiling, humming, wearing that same yellow blouse she almost slipped up in. She greeted me with a kiss on the cheek, asked how my day was, talked about her next work project. I nodded politely. Listened. Answered. Kept my voice calm and steady. I'm sure she thought everything was normal. But for the rest of that night, I watched her the way a man watches the final pieces of a puzzle click into place, not with rage, not with panic, but with an understanding that what she broke, she had no idea how deeply. And while she showered and got ready for bed, I sat alone on the couch thinking about something simple and true. A lie can walk fast. But the truth doesn't have to hurry. It catches up anyway. And Monday morning. It was finally going to catch up to her. Monday morning came quiet. The kind of quiet you feel in your chest before the sun even comes up. Danielle woke up early, earlier than usual, moving around the room with a little more care than she had in weeks. Maybe she sensed something. Maybe her spirit was trying to warn her in ways her pride wouldn't let her hear. She stepped out of the bedroom wearing a soft gray dress and light makeup, the kind she used for days she wanted to seem polished without trying too hard. She saw me at the kitchen table and smiled, but it didn't land the same way it used to. It felt lighter. Thinner. Like a smile stretched over something she didn't want to look at. You ready? She asked. I stood, grabbed my jacket, and nodded. Yeah. Let's go. I had told her we were going to see Pastor Brooks for a marriage check-in. I didn't phrase it like a confrontation. I didn't give her a reason to run. She agreed without question, maybe expecting validation, maybe expecting sympathy. Maybe expecting a place where she could confess just enough to clear her conscience without losing anything. We drove separately. She said she needed to stop for gas on the way, and I didn't argue. Truth has a way of landing the same whether you arrive together or apart. I got to the church early. Pastor Brooks' office sat off to the side of the sanctuary, a warm little room with deep brown walls, framed scriptures, and a small lamp that had been flickering for as long as I'd known her. The space had seen marriages heal and fall apart. It had held confessions, forgiveness, and the kind of truth that shakes people down to the bone. When I walked in, Pastor Brooks stood from her desk and touched my shoulder gently. "You all right?" she asked. "I will be." She gave a small nod. "We'll handle it with grace." That meant everything. A few minutes later, Danielle walked in. She closed the door behind her, smiled at the pastor, and took the seat beside me. She reached for my hand, out of habit, maybe. But I didn't take it. I watched her eyes flicker, confusion passing over her just briefly. Pastor Brooks folded her hands. "Thank you both for coming. Malcolm asked for this meeting. He feels there are things weighing on his heart." Danielle turned to me, her smile dimming. "Mal, what's going on?" I took a slow breath. "Before we start," I said gently, "there's someone else joining us." Danielle blinked fast, a quick flash of panic crossing her face. "Who?" A knock came at the door. Pastor Brooks stood, walked over, and opened it. Tanya stepped in. She wasn't dressed for drama. No makeup. Simple jeans. A sweater. But pain sharpened every line on her face. When her eyes landed on Danielle, there was no anger, just the exhausted truth of a woman who was done being made a fool of. Danielle went still. Her mouth parted slightly, but no sound came out. "Tanya," she whispered, voice already shaking. "What are you doing here?" Tanya walked to the empty chair and sat down slowly, her hands folded tightly in her lap. Pastor Brooks closed the door and took her seat. Danielle looked at me again, now fully afraid. "Mal, what is this?" For the first time since this whole thing began, I let the truth sit on my face. No softness. No polite smile. Just the reality she'd been hiding from. "I know where you were during your break," I said quietly. "I know who you were with." Her breath caught. I reached into my folder and pulled out the first screenshot, the GPS route to the Eden Ridge Boutique Hotel. I placed it on the small coffee table between us. Danielle stared at it. Eyes wide. Color draining from her cheeks. Then the second screenshot. Then the third. Hotel. Restaurant. Conference center. Tanya slid her own stack forward, printouts of emails, receipts, little confirmations that tied everything together. Danielle lifted a shaking hand to her mouth. No, Mal, this isn't, I can explain." "You can," I said evenly. "But not with lies this time." Pastor Brooks leaned forward. Her voice stayed calm, but firm, the kind of firmness that comes from witnessing too many broken vows in that very room. "Danielle," she said softly, "this is a place of truth. Speak plainly." Danielle's eyes flickered between me, the papers. "Tanya, the pastor." She broke. It wasn't dramatic. No sobbing, no wailing. Just a quiet collapse, her back sinking against the chair, her hands trembling over her face. "Mal," her voice cracked, barely more than a whisper. "I never meant for it to go this far." I stared at her. That sentence right there, it told me everything I needed to know. She wasn't sorry she did it. She was sorry she got caught. Tanya let out a shaky breath, then spoke, her voice steadier than I expected. "You were with my husband," she said. 4 months. You knew what you were doing." Danielle wiped her face with her sleeve. "Tanya. I'm so sorry. I didn't think you'd ever know. I didn't think." "That's right," Tanya said quietly. You didn't think. Pastor Brooks folded her hands again. Danielle, do you deny the affair? Danielle shook her head slowly. No. That moment, that one word, was the loudest thing in the room. My chest didn't cave. My breath didn't shake. The pain didn't stab. It settled, steady and clear, like a truth that had finally finished rowing across the river to meet me. I leaned back in my chair and let out a slow exhale. Then we're done here, I said softly. Danielle jolted. Mal, please. You stepped out of this marriage long before you walked into that hotel, I said. You made that choice. And choices have weight. I can fix it, she said. We can work through this. It was just. I was overwhelmed. I felt unnoticed. I didn't know how to. Weapons don't get to apologize to the wounds they make, I said. Her face crumpled. Pastor Brooks reached for Danielle's hand. Child, listen. You broke something that takes years to build. And Malcolm has every right to walk away. Tanya stood then, wiping her eyes. I've said what I needed to say. She walked toward the door. Before she left, she looked at me. I hope you find peace, she whispered. Then she was gone. Danielle sat frozen, staring at the papers, at me, at the floor. Everything she thought she was controlling had slipped out of her hands in a single morning. When I stood to leave, she reached out and grabbed my wrist. Mal, don't go. Please. We can talk. I can change. Just don't leave me. I looked down at her fingers wrapped around my skin. For a moment, I remembered the woman I married, the one who used to hold my hands with certainty, not desperation. Then I gently pulled my arm away. I'm not leaving you right now, I said. I'm leaving the lie. And I walked out. Not fast. Not angry. Not broken. Just done. And for the first time since she came back home smiling, I felt the kind of clarity that only comes after truth walks into a room and refuses to leave. I didn't rush anything after that meeting. I didn't slam a door. Didn't pack a bag in the middle of the night. I went home with Danielle, walked through the same hallway we'd walked together for 22 years, and let the silence do what it needed to do. Danielle tried to talk that afternoon. She tried to explain, tried to apologize, tried to reach for the parts of us she thought would still be soft. But something had shifted between us, something I couldn't force back into place. I sat her down in the living room, the same spot where we'd celebrated birthdays, prayed over our sick kids, and decorated Christmas trees together. I let her speak. I let her empty the excuses out of her system. It was a mistake. I didn't plan for this to happen. I felt alone, Mel. I felt unseen. I never stopped loving you. I swear it didn't mean anything. I listened. And when she ran out of words, I finally spoke. Danielle. I'm not your enemy. I'm not here to punish you. But I'm also not going to pretend this didn't happen. And I'm not going to hold your hand while you rewrite the story to make it easier to bear. She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. Are you leaving me? Not tonight, I said. Tonight I'm just breathing. Her shoulders slumped. That was the truth she didn't want, not anger, but clarity. Not shouting, but a door quietly closing. That night, I slept in the guest room again. She cried softly in our bedroom for a long time, the kind of crying that comes when a person realizes their consequences are real. I didn't go comfort her. It wasn't cruelty. It was acceptance. Over the next few weeks, I moved gently but steadily through the changes I needed to make. I met with a lawyer, a quiet, older gentleman recommended by one of the elder deacons. He listened, asked a few questions, and finally said, "You're a reasonable man. This doesn't have to be ugly." And I knew he was right. I filed for divorce with terms that were fair, not vindictive. No games. No traps. Just a clean ending to something that had broken long before either of us admitted it. Danielle didn't fight me on it. Not really. She cried. She apologized. She begged for counseling, then said nothing would change. She swung between sadness and desperation like a woman trying to negotiate with the tide. But every time she asked, "Can we save this?" I answered the same way, soft but steady. "We can heal. But we can't go back." My daughter, Leah, came over the first weekend after the papers were signed. She hugged me for a long time, the kind of hug where your child isn't a child anymore, but still knows where the safe place is. She asked what happened. I kept it simple. Your mother and I, we reached a truth we couldn't ignore. She nodded. I'm here for you, Dad. Whatever you need. And for the first time since the night I opened that GPS app, something inside me loosened. As the weeks passed, I found my way back to myself without forcing it. I started spending more time outside, fixing small things around the house that had been sitting on my list for years. I cooked simple meals. I prayed more. I slept better, deeper. Not because I was happy, but because the weight of uncertainty was gone. Uncertainty is heavier than heartbreak. At church, people noticed I seemed quieter than usual, but they didn't pry. Pastor Burks checked on me, always with a soft voice and eyes that had seen enough life to understand when a man is rebuilding from the inside out. How's your spirit, Malcolm? She'd ask. Steady, I'd say. And it was true. Not joyful. Not whole. But steady. Danielle stayed in the house until the paperwork was finalized. Then she moved into an apartment across town. The day she left, she stood in the doorway holding a single box of her things. Her eyes were red, tired, swollen. I loved you, she whispered. I know, I said. That was all. She walked out quietly, closed the door behind her, and her footsteps faded down the walkway until I couldn't hear them anymore. And then, the house exhaled. It was empty, but peaceful. Quiet, but not painful. For the first time in a long time, I stood in my living room and felt like every breath I took belonged to me. Healing didn't come in a rush. It came in small changes. A calmer morning. A good night's sleep. A walk after work without checking my phone. A Sunday service where I didn't feel ashamed or bitter. A dinner with Leah where we laughed like old times. It came quietly, like the way grass grows, almost invisible until one day you realize the ground is green again. I didn't hate Danielle. I didn't blame myself. I didn't linger in the past trying to rewind what couldn't be undone. I just kept moving. One steady day at a time. And somewhere along the way, I realized something important. She had left me long before she ever walked out the door. But I was finally learning how to stay with myself. When everything was finally settled, when the papers were signed, the keys were returned, and the last box left the house, I stood in my kitchen on a quiet Sunday morning and realized something I hadn't felt in a long time. Peace. Not the loud, triumphant kind. Not the kind that comes from proving somebody wrong. Just the simple, steady peace of knowing I told the truth, stood on it, and walked away with my dignity intact. I cooked myself breakfast, scrambled eggs, toast, black coffee, nothing fancy. The sunlight came through the blinds soft and gentle. And for the first time in months, maybe years, I didn't feel like I was waiting for something to collapse. Later that afternoon, my daughter FaceTimed me. We watched the game together through the screen, laughing at the same plays, yelling at the same bad calls. Life felt normal again. Not perfect. Not magical. Just solid. A foundation I could stand on. After the call ended, I sat back in my recliner, looked around my quiet house, and let my mind drift one more time to the moment that started it all, that single wee Danielle slipped out the night she came home glowing. One tiny word. One small mistake. And it opened the door to everything I needed to see. Sometimes betrayal doesn't show up with lipstick stains or late-night phone calls. Sometimes it sits right there at your dinner table wearing a smile, and all it takes is one careless sentence for the truth to slip through. So if you're listening to this and you feel something in your spirit that doesn't sit right, pay attention. Don't rush to anger. Don't rush to revenge. Just listen. Watch. Let the truth come to you. Because it always does. And when it arrives, stand in it. Quietly. Firmly. Without fear. You don't need to shout to have strength. You don't need to break someone to prove you're whole. Sometimes the strongest thing a man can do is walk away with his peace. Would you have stayed silent like I did until you knew everything? Let me know in the comments. And if my story spoke to you, subscribe. Because I've got more truth to share.